If a child hands you a folded note with shaking hands, don't walk away. Most people see a man like Dex Morning walk through a door and they make the same calculation in the same 2 seconds. They see the cut. They see the size, 6'2", 240, hands that could palm a basketball without effort, beard the color of iron ore. They see the kind of man you give the wide part of the sidewalk to and do not make eye contact with, and hope is not heading toward the same counter. You are. They see trouble. They see something to get children away from. They see a man who does not belong in a laundromat on a Saturday morning in Ashland, Wisconsin, watching the dryers and drinking bad coffee from a paper cup. But a 7-year-old girl named Iris saw something different. She had been sitting alone in that laundromat for 2.5 hours when Dex walked in. She had her backpack on her lap, and her stamp album open on her knees, and her feet not reaching the floor, and her face arranged in the careful, neutral of a child who has decided that not panicking is the correct choice, and is maintaining that decision by an act of will that was costing her more than it looked. She watched him for 8 minutes. Then she took out her composition book and a pencil. She wrote something. She folded the paper twice. She walked to him. Her hands were shaking when she held it out. He took it. He read it. He did not walk away. What happened next, in that laundromat, and in the hospital 3 blocks east on Main Street, and in the parking lot where 9 motorcycles appeared in the hour that followed, is a story about what a child's shaking hands cost her, and about the man who understood that cost, and about what happens when the right person reads the right piece of paper and decides that the road can wait. Ashland, Wisconsin sat on the south shore of Lake Superior in the way of small Great Lakes cities that had been something specific once, a lumber port, a shipping hub, a place where the lake and the land met in a way that generated commerce, and that had settled, in the decades since, into a kind of purposeful quiet. The downtown was 6 blocks long and had the particular character of a place that has made its peace with its own scale, where the hardware store and the pharmacy and the 2 diners and the laundromat on the corner of 3rd and Main had all been in roughly the same locations for 30 years and had the institutional confidence of things that have stopped needing to prove themselves. The laundromat was called Clean Finish, which was accurate as far as it went. It had 14 front-loading machines and 8 dryers, and a change machine that worked, and a vending machine that did not, and a row of plastic chairs in orange and green along the south wall that had been there since the previous owner, and that would outlast the current one. The smell was detergent and the particular warm mineral smell of machines that handle wet fabric all day. The light was fluorescent, flat, the kind that does not flatter anything and does not try to. On a Saturday morning in May, it was occupied by 4 people: a man in his 50s reading a newspaper, a college-aged woman with earbuds in and a textbook open, and in the corner near the dryers, a small girl in a blue jacket with her backpack on her lap and a stamp album open on her knees. And now, as of 2 minutes, Dex Morning. He was 53 years old. He had spent 20 years in the iron mines outside Hibbing before the mine reduction took his position and a third of the workforce with it, which was the kind of thing that did not ask whether you were ready, and that Dex had handled the way he handled things that did not ask. Completely, without drama, with the specific patience of a man who had spent 2 decades underground and had learned that the only useful response to something immovable was to find the way around it. The way around it had been the chapter which he had joined 12 years ago and had been president of for 4. His cut bore the Iron Range chapter, Hibbing, chapter president, and beneath that, the accumulated patches of 12 years of roads and weather and men and decisions, and the specific kind of friendship that forms between people who have shown up for each other in conditions that other kinds of friendship don't survive. He was wide through the chest and shoulders in the way of a man who had been lifting things for 20 years, with hands that showed it, large, calloused at the palm in the specific pattern of a man who has used them for physical work long enough that the callus has become the hand's natural surface. He had stopped in Ashland because his jacket was wet from 4 hours of light May rain between Duluth and here, and because riding wet in the morning cold of the Lake Superior shoreline was a manageable inconvenience. But drying the jacket first was the smarter choice, and because there was a laundromat on 3rd and Main that he could see from the street, he had a rally to reach in Eau Claire by 7. He had time. He was thinking about Marcus. His son was 30 years old and had been in recovery for 18 months and had called last week for the First time in 8 months, which Dex had answered on the second ring, and which they had talked through for 34 minutes, and Marcus had said something at the end of the call. Something about being sorry, about the years, about a specific thing he had not said before, and Dex had said the things he knew how to say, and had not said the things he did not yet have words for, and the call had ended, and the 34 minutes had been sitting in him since. He was trying to find the words. He had been trying for a week. He put his jacket in a dryer. He bought a coffee from the vending machine that worked. He sat in one of the orange chairs. He noticed the girl. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit subscribe now and drop your city and state in the comments. I want to see where this story reaches. I read everyone now. Back to the laundromat on 3rd and Main. Back to the girl in the corner with the stamp album on her knees. Because what she did in the next 8 minutes took more courage than most adults spend in a year, and because the man she handed the note to understood exactly what it cost her, and because what he did with that understanding is why this story exists. Her name was Iris Kowalczyk. She had been Iris her whole life, not a nickname, not a shortened version of anything, the full Iris, which her mother had chosen because her own grandmother had been Iris, and because the name sounded like it belonged to someone who noticed things, which was the quality her mother had hoped for, and which Iris had delivered fully and without being asked. She was 7 years old, and she was small for 7. Slight, quick, with dark eyes that tracked things with the specific attention of a child who had learned that paying attention was the best available tool in most situations. She had brown hair pulled into a braid that was beginning to come undone on the right side. She wore a blue jacket that fit her correctly, which meant her mother had bought it to fit this year and not next year, which was something Iris's mother did with the small things when she could. She collected stamps. This had begun when she was 4 years old, and her grandfather, her mother's father, the one in Krakow, the one she had met twice, and who had called her Irenka, and who had sent her letters on her birthday written in Polish that her mother translated, with the specific care of someone honoring the effort behind the words, had sent her an envelope with 4 stamps from Poland tucked inside it. He had written a note with the stamps. These have been places. They know things. Take care of them. She had taken care of them. She had 39 more stamps now, organized in a passport-sized album by country, each one in a small plastic sleeve, handled with the reverence of something entrusted to her by a person she intended not to disappoint. She had the album open on her knees now. She was not reading it. She had it memorized. She was touching the pages in the way you touch something when you need to keep your hands doing something that is not what your hands want to do. Her mother was Vera Kowalczyk, 31 years old. They had come to Ashland 6 weeks ago from Milwaukee, which Iris understood as a thing that had happened and that was not going to be explained fully, which was fine because Iris was 7 and understood that some things were not for explaining fully and that the appropriate response was to keep your stamp album organized and your feet from fidgeting and your face arranged the way it should be arranged. Vera had gotten a job at the fish processing plant on the waterfront, which was shift work and cold, and not what she had done before, but which was available and which started in 2 weeks and which Vera had described as good news, which Iris had understood to mean news that was better than the alternative. This morning Vera had brought the laundry because the apartment building's machines were both broken. She had loaded the washers, started them, given Iris the stamp album and a quarter for the gumball machine, and a granola bar from her coat pocket, and told Iris she would be back in an hour. She had driven to the pharmacy first, because she needed something for the pain that had been building for 2 days in her lower back, the kind of pain that she had been managing, and that had decided this morning to stop being manageable. She had not made it to the pharmacy. She had pulled over 2 blocks from the laundromat when the pain went from bad to the specific category of bad that required a different response. She had driven to the Ashland R. She had told the intake nurse about her daughter in the laundromat, and the nurse had noted it, and Vera had believed that noted meant addressed. She had given them her phone to charge because it was at 4%, and she would need it to call Iris's laundromat number, which she did not have because Iris did not have a phone because Iris was 7. The phone had died before it charged enough to use. That was 2.5 hours ago. Iris had finished the granola bar in the first hour. She had put the quarter in the gumball machine and gotten a green gumball, which she had eaten slowly because slowly was better than fast. She had looked at the stamps 17 times. She had counted the dryers 8. She had counted the washers 14. She had not cried. She had made a decision not to cry because crying was for when things were unfixable, and things were not unfixable yet. Things were difficult. Difficult was different. When the man with the cut walked in, she had looked at him for 3 seconds and filed him in the category of large, which was the first category, and then in the subcategory of quiet, which was the important one. She had known men who were large and not quiet. The difference mattered. She had been observing it since she was old enough to observe, and she had arrived at accurate conclusions about it. She watched him for 8 minutes. She opened her composition book. She wrote the note in pencil. Because her pencil was sharp and her pen had run out last week, she wrote 4 sentences. She read them twice. She folded the paper twice along careful creases. She stood up. She walked to the orange chair where he was sitting. Her hands were shaking. She knew they were shaking. She held the note out anyway, because shaking was not the same as stopping, and she was not stopping. He looked at her hands. He looked at her face. He took the note. He read it slowly. Not the reading of a man who was uncertain, the reading of a man who understood that this specific piece of paper deserved to be read slowly, that the person who had written it had taken care with it, and the reading should match the writing. My mom went to the hospital and she hasn't come back. Her name is Vera Kowalczyk. I've been here for a long time. I'm okay, but I don't know where she is. He read it twice. He looked at her, he said. She looked at the clock on the wall above the dryers. She looked at the since 9, she said, I think. He looked at the clock. It was 11:47. Are you hungry, he said. She thought about this seriously. A little, she said. He got up, he went to the vending machine. He bought 2 things, crackers and a package of peanut butter, and brought them back and set them on the chair beside her without comment. She opened the crackers. She ate with the deliberate pace of someone who has been rationing, and has not decided yet whether to stop rationing. He took out his phone. He called Ashland General. He gave Vera's name. He waited. He was told that there was a Vera Kowalczyk in the ER and that the hospital could not share information about her condition, which was the policy, and which Dex acknowledged. And then he said, her daughter is at the laundromat on 3rd and Main. She's been there since 9. I need you to tell Vera Kowalczyk that her daughter is with someone and she's okay. There was a pause. I'll pass that along, the woman said. Thank you, he said. He looked at Iris. Your mom's at the hospital, he said. I called them. They're going to tell her you're okay. Iris looked at the stamp album in her lap. She said she'd be back in an hour, she said. Something came up, he said. It happens. She looked at him. Is she sick? He looked at the phone. He looked at her. She needed some help, he said. They're helping her. Iris was quiet for a moment. She opened the stamp album. She turned to a page near the middle. This one's from Portugal, she said. My grandpa sent it. He found it at a market. He looked at the stamp, small blue, a ship on it. He collects them, he said. He used to, she said. He gave them to me now. He looked at the stamp. How many do you have, he said. 43, she said. But 2 are duplicates, so it depends if you count countries or stamps. He considered this. Both numbers matter, he said. She looked at him. That's what I thought, she said. He made 3 more calls from the laundromat. The first was to his road captain, a man named Dale Foss, who was in Spooner, an hour south. He told Dale what was at the hospital and what he needed, which was someone to check on the woman, and someone who knew the right person to call if the right person needed to be called, which Dale understood because Dale had been road captain for 6 years, and right person to call was the road captain's primary skill. Dale said, I'll be there in 50. The second call was to a woman named Bennett, who ran the crisis support line for the chapter's community outreach program, which was not a thing most people knew the chapter had, and which Dex had built 3 years ago. Because the chapter had encountered enough situations like this one to understand that encounter was not the same as equipped. Bet was equipped. He described the situation. Bet said she knew a social worker at Ashland County who was good and who answered her phone on Saturdays. The third call was to the laundromat itself. He wanted to know if anyone on staff had seen the girl come in, which the owner, a man named Hal who was in the back doing maintenance, had, and who confirmed the time. Dex asked if he could stay until the situation was resolved. Hal said, of course, and brought out a chair from the back office because the plastic chairs were not designed for the duration. Iris watched all of this without commenting. She ate the crackers. She organized the stamps in the album by size within country, which was not how she usually organized them, but which gave her hands something to do, while her brain did the thing it was doing. "What's this one?" Dex said when she turned a page. She looked down. "Iceland," she said. "Mom found it in a junk shop in Milwaukee. She doesn't collect them. She just found it." "She knew you'd want it," he said. Iris looked at the stamp. "Yes," she said. Dale Foss arrived at 11:58. He was 47, slight in the way of men who have been riding in all weather for 20 years and whose bodies have been streamlined by the exposure with the specific alertness of a road captain who's required knowing where everyone is at all times. He came in, saw Dex, nodded, saw Iris, and did the small recalibration of a man updating his read of a situation. He crouched to Iris's level. "You the one who handed over the note?" "Yes," he said. "Smart," Dale said. He looked at Dex. "Hospital says the mom's out of the ear, in a room. Kidney stone. They're managing it. She's asking for her daughter." Iris's face did something. It went through several things in the span of 2 seconds. Not crying, not quite that, but the release of something that had been held against its will for 2.5 hours in the corner of a laundromat, and the release of it was visible in the way her shoulders changed, and the way she held the stamp album, and the way her feet started swinging again on the plastic chair, because the stillness was over and swinging was what feet did when the worst part was past. "Can I see her?" Iris said. "That's why we're here," Dex said. Nobody in that laundromat had watched any of this. The man with the newspaper was on the sports section. The college student had switched from the textbook to her phone. The dryers turned. The fluorescent lights did what they did. 6 people in a room, and 4 of them had found other things to occupy themselves. Because the thing happening in the corner, near the orange chairs, belonged to the people, and then the room had decided to give it the space it needed. That was enough. Engines. The sound of them reached the hospital parking lot at 12:19 when Dale's Heritage Softail arrived, followed by 2 more bikes from the French chapter, who had been between Duluth and Ashland, rerouted by Dale's calls, arriving in the specific unhurried way of men who know where they are going and are not going to make it a production. Then 3 more over the following 40 minutes, each one parking with the consideration of men in a hospital lot who understand that hospitals are not the right place for noise. 9 motorcycles by 1 o'clock. The hospital staff had noted them. Nobody had objected. There was nothing to object to. Men in a parking lot, not blocking anything, not loud, waiting. Iris saw them from the window of the hospital corridor when Dex walked her from the main entrance toward her mother's room. She stopped walking. She counted. 9, she said. 8, Dex said. Dale's bike is mine. He paused. Different chapter. She looked at the parking lot for a moment. "They came for my mom," she said. "They came because I called," he said. "That's what they do." She looked at the bikes. She looked at the stamp album in her arm. "Like stamps," she said. He looked at her. "They go places when they're called," she said. "Stamps go wherever the letter goes." He stood in the hospital corridor with a 7-year-old girl who had just compared his chapter to a postal system and found the comparison adequate. "Something like that," he said. She nodded, as though this confirmed something she had already suspected, and continued walking toward room 214. Vera Kowalczyk was sitting up in the hospital bed when they came through the door. She was 31 years old, and she had the specific look of a person who has been through something physical and has come out on the other side of it with the clarity that pain sometimes leaves, the clarity of knowing what matters and of not being confused about it. She had been asking for her daughter for 40 minutes, and the asking had become progressively more precise as her phone charged on the hospital's outlet, and she had begun to understand the gap between noted and addressed. Iris walked to the bed. She did not say anything. She held up the stamp album. Vera looked at it. She looked at her daughter. She reached out both arms. Iris got on the bed and sat beside her mother and let her mother hold her, and the stamp album was between them, open to the Portugal page, the blue ship stamp visible in its sleeve, the 43 stamps organized by country with the 2 duplicates accounted for. Dex stood in the doorway. He had not intended to come in. He had intended to hand off at the door and go. But the door was open, and Iris had walked through it without looking back, which meant she had trusted him to follow, and he had followed, and now he was standing in the doorway of a hospital room in Ashland, Wisconsin, with a paper cup of vending machine coffee in his hand and his jacket finally dry. Vera looked up from her daughter. She looked at Dex. She said, "She wrote you a note." "She did," he said. "Were her hands shaking?" She said. He looked at the corridor. He looked back. Yes, he said. Vera closed her eyes for a moment. She opened them. She gets that from me, she said. When she's scared, her hands shake and she keeps going anyway. She looked at the stamp album. I don't know where she learned to keep going. Dex said nothing. He looked at the stamp album, at the Portugal page, at the ship. He thought about a grandfather in Krakow who sent stamps with a note that said these been places. They know things. Take care of them. He thought about a 7-year-old girl who had taken care of them for 3 years and who had organized them by country and handled with the reverence of something entrusted to her by someone she did not intend to disappoint. He thought about Marcus on the phone. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry for the years. The thing he had said that Dex had not yet found the words to answer. She learned it from you, he said. Vera looked at him. You don't know me, she said, but she does. Bet from the chapter's outreach program arrived at 2:15. She sat with Vera for an hour while the social worker from Ashland County, who answered her phone on Saturdays, made calls about emergency assistance, about the apartment, about the job at the fish processing plant that started in 2 weeks and that was not in jeopardy, about the specific combination of short-term bridge resources available to a woman who had arrived 6 weeks ago and who was new enough to the county that the county systems had not yet found her. The systems found her on a Saturday afternoon because a woman named Bet made calls, and because a social worker named Priya answered them, and because both of them had been doing this work long enough to know which calls to make in which order. Iris sat in the chair beside the bed and organized the stamps by size, and then unorganized them and organized them by country again, which was the correct system, and she had just confirmed this. Dex left at 3. He did not make an announcement. He looked into the room from the doorway. Iris saw him. He raised one hand. She raised one back. She pointed at the stamp album. She held it up to show him the page she had turned to. He looked. It was a United States stamp, a landscape, mountains, the specific brown gold of a western range in the fall. He did not know which range. She mouthed something at him. He could not hear through the noise of the corridor. He pointed to his ear. Can't hear you. She held up one finger. She reached into the front pocket of the stamp album. She took out a small plastic sleeve. Inside it was a stamp. She held it up. He did not know the country. It was not in English. She pointed at him. He looked at her. She pushed the sleeve toward the glass of the small window in the door. He shook his head. He could not take her stamp. She shook her head back. Not an argument, a correction. She pointed at the stamp. She pointed at him. She pointed at the door, at the corridor, at the parking lot, at the direction of his Road King and the road to Eau Claire. She was giving him a stamp for going places. These have been places. They know things. Take care of them. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He came into the room. She handed him the sleeve. He took it. He put it in his jacket pocket, in the same pocket where his chapter card was, where the chapter card would keep it flat. He went out. He did not look back. He reached the rally in Eau Claire at 7:14. He parked and sat on the Road King for a moment in the way he always did at the end of a long ride, recalibrating, feeling the ground be still. He took out his phone. He called Marcus. Marcus answered on the second ring, which meant he had not paused this time. Hey, Dad, he said. Hey, Dex said. He was quiet for a moment. He was trying to find the words he had been trying to find for a week. He thought about a 7-year-old girl in a laundromat with shaking hands and a folded note and the specific courage of a child who keeps going when her hands are shaking. That call last week, he said. The thing you said about being sorry. I heard it, Dex said. I just didn't say the right thing back. He paused. I'm saying it now. I'm glad you called. I've been glad every day since. Marcus didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, Okay, Dad. Okay, Dex said. They talked for 22 minutes. The rally was happening around him. 800 people. The specific organized noise of a Friday night with music and fires, and the kind of company that accumulates when men who have ridden together for years are finally in the same place. He stayed on the bike until Marcus had said what he needed to say. He listened to all of it. There is a 7-year-old girl in Ashland, Wisconsin, who has 43 stamps in a passport-sized album organized by country. She has 42 now. The 43rd is in the jacket pocket of a man who rides an Iron Range Chapter Road King between Hibbing and wherever the road requires, and who carries it with the specific care of someone who has been entrusted with something that has been places and knows things. She gave it to him because he read the note. He read the note because she held it out. She held it out because her hands were shaking, and she kept going anyway. That is the whole moral. The title told you the moral before the story started. The story is the evidence. And the evidence is this. Somewhere in every room you will ever walk into, there is a person holding something out with shaking hands. The shaking is what it costs them to ask. Don't walk away. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to remember that shaking hands are a form of courage. Subscribe so you're here for the next story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And type Iris in the comments if this one stayed with you, because some stamps go places you don't expect, and the ones given with shaking hands travel the farthest of all.